All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us at the DMZ today. We're very delighted to have this crowd come out early in the morning on a Tuesday, which is not hump day yet, but it's close to it. Regardless where you're from, the road you've traveled, or your experiences along the way, everyone in this room shares a notable connection. We're all deeply inspired by technology and the entrepreneurial drive to turn the seeds of ideas into transformational businesses. That connection, the common pursuit of turning nothing into something, is what gave rise to the DMZ and what has become an amazing community of entrepreneurs and innovators. And it's also worth noting that each one of us has a narrative, stories of bitter lessons learned, some of us more than others, near misses and success in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. Again, our stories are part of what binds us all and what brings us here today. Jack Dorsey, obviously, is an impressive and inspirational tech entrepreneur, to say the absolute least. Originally from St. Louis, Jack's fascination with urban transit led him to Manhattan, where he programmed real-time messaging systems for couriers, taxis, and emergency vehicles. Through his work, Jack witnessed thousands of drivers in the field constantly updating their location and activity, inspiring the idea behind what we all know as Twitter. A company he co-founded and is CEO of today, Jack's dedication to simplifying the complex and making technology accessible to everyone everywhere continued with the founding of Square in 2009. I can't believe I'm giving an overview about Jack when we all know about Jack, but we're going to continue doing this. Whether a business needs to accept cards, manage a full point of sale system, or sell online, Square offers easy and affordable tools so businesses of all sizes can start, run, and grow. Now, I don't want to share too much about Jack because I'm sure we're going to all hear about him from him. And in a moment, we'll hear about Square's beginnings, the importance of having a bold vision, and why the economy is better when everyone has access to it. That brings us to Takara. So Takara Small is a close friend of the DMZ, a former employee, of course. She's a Toronto-based technology journalist, startup founder, public speaker. She is the tech columnist for CBC's Metro Mornings, on-air tech expert for CP24 and CTV, as well as a host of the Globe and Mail's technology podcast. She's also the founder of Venture Kids Canada, which is a nonprofit that teaches coding and entrepreneurship skills to youth in underserved communities. Her mission is building Venture Kids is to ensure youth from low-income families have access to first-rate mentors, resources, and opportunities in the country's emerging tech ecosystem. Both Takara and Jack share in their dedication as entrepreneurs to empowering the underserved. Takara is moderating today's conversation with Jack, which starts right now. And before I actually end off, I learned a bit about Jack today when I was reading a bit more detail. And I learned that he's a big fan of Kendrick Lamar. And I was just mentioning to him, now that he's in Toronto, I really hope that somewhere on the World Wide Web it starts to mention that Jack loves Drake. You know, it's just a natural thing, and also a food connoisseur. So if any of you get a chance to speak with Jack at the end, make sure you tell him your favorite restaurant. I think he'd probably appreciate that. So that's all for me, folks. Takara, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to thank Jack as well for sitting down with us. So before we start, a little housekeeping. We do have a strict 30-minute time limit. After our conversation, there will be some time for Q&As, and then after that, we will be heading downstairs for a media scrum. But at any time, please feel free to tweet empowering entrepreneurs, and maybe we'll ask one of your questions. Okay, so let's get started. I feel like I want to start with the Kendrick Lamar part. We were talking downstairs, and I was like, I love him, and I was actually listening to Humble as I was getting ready. So thinking about The Secret, if I say Jack and Kendrick Lamar enough times, I'll be on stage with him in under a year. But let's talk about Square, first of all. A lot of people were curious, when did you know that Square, was going to be a success, and how did you turn that idea into what it is today?
Well, there wasn't any one point, but I will tell a story where I think we realized there was a fork in the road, and we took the right path, and that came through just asking this question, why? So we, the founding story of Square was pretty simple. My co-founder, who was my first boss when I was, my second boss when I was 15 years old. My mom was my first boss. She had a coffee store, and we stayed in touch for quite some time. And at one point, after I became chairman of Twitter, he called me up, and he was. We knew we wanted to work together again, but we didn't really know on what. And he called me up, super frustrated, and I said, what's going on? He's like, I know what we need to work on. I said, what? And he said, well, as you know, I'm a glass artist, and I was trying to sell this piece of glass art to this guy, and he wanted to pay via credit card, and I couldn't accept a credit card. I said, yeah. And he said, well, we need to build that. We need to build an ability for me to accept a credit card. And I said, wow, I know nothing about credit cards. Jim knows nothing about credit cards. We were both in pretty significant credit card debt. We saw how the credit card industry impacted negatively so many lives where we're from, St. Louis, Missouri. So it didn't feel like a thing that we really wanted to get into. But we decided to pull the thread, and we gave ourselves a month, and we built a little bit of hardware, and we built a little bit of software, and the thing worked, and it felt really amazing. And it felt even more amazing given that when I was showing this off to people, I was actually taking money from them. So that was really cool. And then eventually we decided to show it to some other folks, and there was a flower cart under my apartment named Lilybell. It was run by this woman named Sherry. And we asked her if she wanted to use our system and try our system, because we noticed she was cash only. And she said, no, I went to a bank before and I applied to get a merchant account, but they told me no. So I'm just going to keep it simple. And we went back a week later and we asked her, we improved it. Do you want to try now? You can make more sales. And she said, no, I'm pretty good. I just want to keep it simple and straightforward. We went back the next week with the same pitch, and she said, you guys need to leave me alone. I'm just going to accept cash. And in that moment, a guy came up and he wanted to buy some flowers. He handed over a credit card, and she said, I don't accept that, but there's an ATM in the donut shop around the corner. So if you go around the corner and get some cash, I'll sell you these flowers. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and walked away, and we waited 5 minutes, didn't come back, 10 minutes, didn't come back, 15 minutes. She turned to us and said, I'll try this thing. And we're like, okay. So we got our first merchant. And it took us some time to realize it, but that was the moment that created the most value in the company, because before that, we were thinking we were building a credit card terminal, a little bit of hardware, a little bit of software. We may have sold the hardware, we may have sold the software, and it felt fairly traditional. But about 6 months later, we realized the reason that she finally said yes was not to swipe credit cards. The reason she finally said yes was because she missed a sale. And that, digging a little bit deeper, we realized that it wasn't about building that hardware, it was about enabling a seller to participate in the economy in the first place. Because all these buyers were going around and they were using these plastic cards, and they loved using them because they were convenient. It wasn't about cash or credit, it was just about, this is something that's fast and easy. And as a seller, if you didn't accept the form of payment that the buyer wanted to use, you would miss the sale. And so we decided in that moment to give the reader away for free, give the software away for free, simplify the entire approach, and then looked into why sellers weren't being accepted into accepting credit cards in the first place. So we found that to start accepting credit cards, you had to go through a credit check, and you had to go through a FICO score check, And most entrepreneurs, most small businesses that are getting started, they don't have good credit. Jim and I didn't have good credit. In order for us to start accepting credit cards, we had to lie on our application.
Sorry.
And you have to do what you have to do. You have to do what you have to do. And so we decided to fix that. We found that only 30% of the people that applied to accept credit cards would actually get through the system. And we, by just applying some technology and rethinking the system a little bit, got that number to 99%.
Wow.
So we started with this mindset of including as many people as possible, trusting and then verifying along the way, whereas the industry started with distrust, bringing people through a gate and then kind of verifying along the way. So we changed the model in that regard, but what really broke through was, since we moved our mindset from building a credit card reader to building a way for people to make a sale, that opened the door for us to do other things like point of sale. Point of sale allows you to see your business and make decisions about whether you should buy more cups or you should open a little bit later or you should stay open more. And all those small decisions, even that simple piece of software called the point of sale, enable people to see their business better, which enabled them to make more sales. So suddenly we're building this service for people to make the sale and ideally make more sales. And that led to what else can help people make more sales? Well, if we lend them money, then they can make more sales too. So we created this business called Square Capital. And then we just continue to look at all these critical needs that are blocking people from participating in the economy, and how do we build tools that empower people into the economy. And suddenly the company changed from being a credit card terminal company, which would be not that valuable at all, not that differentiated, to being immensely valuable because we were building this ecosystem of tools to help people make sales in the first place. So, while it might look, and we were starting with something that was quite simple by asking the question why is this actually being used, why is this important, and going a few layers deeper, we found a ton of resonance and we found a ton of value that has created the company that we get to work at today.
And following up to the question, I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs in the audience, and I want to call out Hula Girl at the back, who's providing the coffee, and Hey Taylor, who actually just made his first payment through Square last week, I believe. There are a lot of entrepreneurs here, and they are probably interested in what advice you have for them, especially just recounting how in the beginning with Square it wasn't an easy ride. Like, what advice would you have, especially in the economy today?
Yeah, it wasn't easy at all. I mean, we let's see, a few of the things we did. First, we didn't hire anyone with any banking or financial or credit card experience until about employee 100.
Why did you decide to do that?
Well, we were told that we need that, and we just decided to ignore that. And there is a virtue in being somewhat naive about what exists, because we were approaching it with more of a mindset of what do we want to see exist, and how can we, what do we need to figure out in order to build that experience. So we wanted something that people could download an app, and within 5 minutes they could be up and running and making money. And that just didn't exist in the industry. So we just continued to ask the question, why? And we got to some pretty compelling answers that we could eventually build. But it was still, we still had all these blockades at every single turn. And one of the interesting things that we did that helped us along the way is when we were raising money for our Series A, we created a pitch deck, and we gave ourselves 2 weeks to see as many VCs as possible. And we arranged so that all the VCs that we didn't want to work with were at the start.
Interesting.
And all the VCs that we wanted to work with were at the end. And therefore we had a ton of practice going on up to the folks that we really wanted to work with. And the second thing we did is in that pitch deck we had a slide which was 140 reasons why this will fail. So just right up front, we listed out all the reasons why this might fail and why you should not invest. And we took 10 of them out, and we went in detail as to why it would be a mistake to invest in us, why it'd be a mistake to invest in this company. And we gave reasons why we're going to solve those problems. So one of the reasons was, it might be the case that Jim, my co-founder, and I go to jail because we're moving money around and it's highly regulated, and there's a lot that could go wrong in order to get something right. So even in my interviews of our first employees, I would say, this is this company, we're either going to have a massive success or I'm going to jail. Like, there's no
in between.
There's no in between, and that's what we were shooting for. And some people are like, "Well, I need to leave," and some people are like, "Tell me more. Why would you go to jail?" So we try to disarm as much as possible in the early days by just admitting what we didn't know and how we were going to figure it out.
And so how did you find those early employees, though? Because like you mentioned, you were in an unknown space, and I imagine it would have been challenging to attract the right talent.
Yeah, a lot of it just came through referrals. I think a lot of startups I know of are, you start, a person, and they know a person, and some of those folks work out and some of those don't. And then when we launched, we got some buzz, and we got a lot of why does this thing exist? And there were some people who were curious enough to come in and ask more questions, and they joined our team as well. So it's just through people being attracted to what we were doing and the purpose, and that's always my number one question in any interview is why Square? And if I heard, well, it seems like your background, or this thing feels like a rocket ship, or it feels like a guaranteed success, or this space is really interesting, that was a signal that we shouldn't work with that person. But oftentimes I would hear, well, my mom used to run a restaurant, and she dealt with all the things that you're trying to solve, and here's all the things that you're doing wrong, and here's how I could help you fix them. So hearing that passion for a purpose right away, the passion for the purpose is not something you can teach, and if it's not there, it's going to be a significant drag. So what that meant for us is we need to have a lot of clarity around what our purpose was and why we believed it was important. We could articulate it in a simple and straightforward way that would resonate with other people. And if it resonated, awesome. Everything else can be taught. But if it didn't, we wouldn't work together. And
so through Square Capital, you do provide loans. You provide that chance for entrepreneurs to grow their business. Is there any examples or mistakes that you've seen businesses or entrepreneurs do just over the years? Like two big major mistakes?
In general? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, tons of it. I mean, we made them all. I think the biggest one is probably the one that folks tend to be the slowest on, and also has the greatest negative impact, is not paying attention to the team dynamic that you're building.
Interesting.
And I think naturally when you're just getting started, you kind of over-optimize for who are the superstars, who are the best in the field, and we need to find those folks and just hire those folks. And you focus too much on the individuals that you're bringing in, and not enough on the dynamic between the individuals. And sometimes you can find this amazing superstar, and they'll be great at their particular discipline or their particular job, but they're super negative and toxic in some regard, and it brings the whole team down. We had this had this experience at both companies, but we had this individual at one point who had the whole system in his head, and we were, if he were to leave, we couldn't imagine getting the site back up and the service back up, but it was very, very negative and was bringing the whole team down. And it took months and months and months before I acted on it. And when we finally parted ways, something really interesting happened. The site came back up, and 3 new leaders emerged from that moment. So paying attention very closely, especially in the early phases, to the dynamic that you're building, and that you have folks who are empowering one another, they're supporting one another, and they're bringing optimism and positivity to the work rather than a lot of negativity, because it just causes a significant drag on the work and the team dynamic.
I wonder what happens if you are in a team and you already have that type of individual as part of the company. What do you do then?
Well, I mean, do your best to try to change the mindset, but if it doesn't work out, I think you gotta make other choices. And I think one has to realize that the best thing that you can do for the company and also this individual is probably part ways, because if there's negativity being felt by the team, it's also probably being felt by the individual, and acknowledging that, addressing it in some way, will lead to a much better outcome for both. And sometimes parting ways or ending relationships may feel like you're taking something away, but you're probably giving back both to yourself and also to this other individual. And it's really hard to do, and really hard to realize and acknowledge, but it's critical, in my view.
And I was reading an article this morning from a Canadian paper. They did an interview with you, I believe, yesterday, and it kind of made me question, what your thoughts are and how Square will evolve, especially as traditional payments like cash, et cetera, become less common. How do you see Square and other payment processes changing in the future?
Well, financial technology is pretty popular now. Square is 10 years old. We weren't that popular back then. The whole industry was. What was interesting is that anytime there's a recession or a depression, whether it be throughout a market, industry, personally, it's always a great time to start something, because everything is being cleared away, questioned, new ideas are talked about, and there's an openness to changing some things. So we happened to start the company at a time where a lot of people thought it was probably the worst time in the world to start a financial company, which was the collapse of the U.S. banks in 2008, 2009. So we started at the first of the year in 2009, and what we found was, in financial technology, you do have to work with the bigger established entities, and we found that a lot of the folks in those companies were pretty new, and really open to changing, sometimes getting pressure to change. So we took full advantage of it, and we were able to move much faster in that period than I think if we were to start in a more stable period. If we were to start in 2007, I think it would probably take us 2 years to get off the ground, whereas in 2009, we get a prototype out that we could have merchants use within 4 months. And then we just kept doing things that tried to increase the size of that. So a story about this, we had a merchant acquirer who would allow us to, we signed up with our merchant acquirer as a glass blower, as a glass artist, and said, okay, well, you can do $10,000 a month, and we would put all these merchants on this account. And at one point we got a call, it's like, hey, you're doing you're doing 10,000 a week. We need to hold your money. And are you sure you're a glass blower? Because this looks a little bit different. And we're like, yeah. We're this guy's just amazing. People love his art, and he's just doing so well. And they're like, okay. And they raised our amount, and we kept telling these stories to prove more of the resonance with more and more people. And the same thing happened with our pilot program. We were enabled to have 5,000 merchants, and we signed up 5,000 merchants, and then we signed up another 5,000 merchants, and we got a call saying, hey, it looks like you have more than 5,000 merchants. We're like, yeah, this engineer we had, was a bug in the system. We lost count, and we signed up more. And they're like, well, you're only allowed 5,000 merchants. And we're like, oh, damn, we'll fix the bug, but do you want us to turn these other 5,000 merchants off? And they're like, no, they're processed, and you can keep them. And that happened at 10,000 and 20,000 and 100,000, and we kept going back. We could turn 100,000 people off if you want us to turn them off. And they said, no, we're good. And then eventually we got out of the pilot restrictions, and we could sign up as many people as we wanted. So it's just through a lot of hustle and a lot of challenging the system a bit, and being open and being clever and telling a good story. But our intention was to prove resonance. Like, this is something people want, and we need as many people as possible to show the powers that be, those being the card networks and the banks, that we're responsible, that this is valuable to people, that as we grow, we're building more controls into the system, and that all worked out. So we took a bet on ourselves and made sure that we were very transparent along the way, and we just continued to prove that we could do this, and that it wasn't going to fail in the way that we originally articulated it was going to fail.
And I feel like Canada has always played a pivotal role in the global economy, but now I feel like there are more eyeballs on the entrepreneurs and the businesses that are based here. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the Canadian tech ecosystem and perhaps what you see moving forward for how we'll play in the global ecosystem.
Yeah, I think the biggest first and foremost is I don't believe that San Francisco and Silicon Valley have a monopoly on starting companies that can have global impact. I don't believe that you need to move there to start a company that has global impact. And I think technology is enabling more and more of that. And we just need to prove it out more. So I think there hasn't been a better time to start a company in any space and in any location. If you think about the ideals of the internet, it makes location and geography completely irrelevant. It makes what you look like completely irrelevant. It makes your background completely irrelevant. And it really emphasizes the merit of an idea and how quickly you can spread that. So I think that's very telling, and I'm happy to see that. If I were to start another company today, I would not start it in San Francisco. I moved there originally in 1999 in order to get into that scene, but it's not a place I would begin today.
Why?
Well, because I think
Maybe Toronto.
It's more interesting elsewhere. Yeah, maybe Toronto. But I think if I were to start a company today, I wouldn't start it with a headquarters in any one particular city. It would be completely distributed. It wouldn't matter where anyone worked. It would only matter that they could bring something significant to the table. And all the tools exist in order to do that. So the thing, though, that San Francisco and the Bay Area had that made it an interesting place to start is it had a lot of forgiveness for mistakes. And it had this amazing support network where mistakes and failures were expected and not something that people, when you made a mistake or when you failed, people wrote off completely. There's just an openness to trying again and trying again and trying again. So the support network was really the thing. It was a very, very short memory of what you did, what you failed at, and what you're currently working on. So people kind of saw things with very fresh eyes all the time. So I do think if there's one thing to establish here in Toronto, it's more of a support network like this that enables people to feel comfortable making some mistakes and getting back up and trying it again. And again, technology continues to help in this dimension. So, we're entering into a moment where you could start something that has global impact literally anywhere in the world, and people all over the world can participate with your creation, and that's super exciting. It's begun. No one can stop it, and it really diminishes the role of a particular geography for starting these things. So, I think it's I love Toronto. I love Canada. We've found so many amazing folks in terms of our customers, in terms of our engineers within this country, and so much creativity and so much entrepreneurship, especially around open source, crypto, and just everything that we've desired has been here. But I think it's becoming less and less about where you are and more about what problem you're trying to solve and how quickly you can go from something in your head to actually something that other people can use. And that's where I would focus, is less around the geographies and more around how do you get the thing out of your head as quickly as possible, because when something is in your head, you consistently make excuses for why it won't work. And that takes all the potential away from other people seeing resonance in it and actually saying, actually, this is a good idea, but here's what's missing. So pushing as quickly as possible to get the thing out of your head, whether it be through a canvas or a programming interface or a keynote. I prefer to make sure that I can at least do whatever I can, learn whatever I need to learn to get to a prototype so that people can actually feel it and I can feel it. And if I can feel it, I get more confidence mentally that I can do more around it. So I think the most important thing is to really focus on like, what gaps do I have? What skills do I need to fill to just get the thing to work? I've been programming since I was 14 years old. I would not consider myself an engineer. I'm a hacker. A hacker to me is someone who just does whatever it takes to make the thing work and then figures out the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Engineers are magicians because they make it stay up. But I wrote all the code to start Twitter. I wrote all the code to start Square. None of the code exists in either system today, and I'm very thankful it doesn't, because it was really terrible. But it worked, and it worked enough that I could show to other people, and they could say, I want to work on that too, or I want to use that, which were further proof points.
Yeah. You're saying so much like amazing things that it makes me envious of the reporters in the front row who are typing away, because that means I can't write a story about this. So I'm very envious of you guys right now. We have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to do a rapid fire question part. It's what I do with the podcast that I run. It's going to be a lot of fun nonsense, pretty much. So the first one is, okay, well, I already know this. What's your favorite artist? Who's your favorite artist?
Kendrick Lamar.
Ooh, shocker, right? Favorite food?
I'm from St. Louis, so there's this food called toasted ravioli.
Toasted ravioli?
Yeah, which was an accident. Someone actually dropped a piece of ravioli in the deep fryer, took it out, ate it, and it's really good. Not the healthiest.
We need to bring that to not the healthiest.
Yeah, really
we need
good.
to bring that to Toronto.
Yeah.
Favorite city besides Toronto? I'm just gonna take that off the list already.
Favorite city?
So I like choosing your favorite child?
There's this, I don't know. I just love variety and different perspectives. So more than choosing one, I want to visit as many as possible. But I like the smaller towns. There's this little town in far west Texas called Marfa, which is just this weird little town that's full of ranchers and artists, and it's just weird. So anything that's weird, I like a lot.
Okay, so I definitely have to send you an invite to my small town. We're known for cheese, and there's 500 people in there. So
Amazing.
you'll
Up my
feel
alley.
right at home, full of weirdos.
Yeah,
Proof right here.
I love it.
What's your, I guess, your go-to morning ritual? Like the one thing you need to do to start the day off?
Well, I think it's important to, first and foremost, like the most important thing I can do for all of the customers that we serve and all of our employees at both companies, the most important thing I can do is focus on self-improvement. So any hour I spend improving myself benefits me, benefits the company, and therefore benefits our sellers and our customers. So that's number one. But number two is that these practices constantly evolve as you learn. So my practices today are completely different than they were 5 years ago. But today, meditation is probably the thing that has the greatest impact. So I wake up and meditate for an hour, and I meditate for an hour before I go to bed. And it feels like a long time, 2 hours a day, but those 2 hours I spend practicing clarity and focus, and just being still makes every hour that I'm awake that much more productive and that much more clear, and I just think I get better work out of it. So that's probably the greatest part of my routine at the moment, but it may change.
Awesome. So I'm getting the signal that now we're going to start the Q&A part. So does anyone have any questions? Please raise your hand, and Ahmed will choose. I'll leave it up to Ahmed to choose.
Hey Jack, I actually was in St. Louis recently and tried the toasted ravioli, so it is pretty good.
It's pretty amazing.
I also saw the Cards win, but yeah, so I have a question. What is a fundamental worldview or belief that you had 5 years ago that today you've changed your mind on? And another one, what are 2 books?
One question. I'll get in trouble. I'll get in trouble if I let you do 2.
I think the most impactful book I've read in the past 20 years is this book called *Sapiens*, which I'm sure a number of you have read. Just because it focuses on the evolution of the human species through this concept of storytelling, and I think it's so enlightening. The power of the stories we tell, the power of language, power of narrative, the power of fiction to organize. And in terms of worldview, 5 years ago, I put a lot of emphasis on where I physically was, and that has completely changed. I'm trying to decentralize both companies out of San Francisco, and I found that to be really, really hard. We have this concept of a headquarters, which is San Francisco, and these remote offices, and within the next 4 or 5 years, I want to make sure that I never hear those 2 words again. Never hear the word remote. Never hear the word headquarters. And that we don't have locations on any of our job recs at all. And that's going to be very, very hard to do because we have all these constraints about what level you are to be able to work outside of a major hub for us. But all these entrepreneurs I talk to these days, they're starting with the intention, as I talked about earlier, with I don't want a headquarters in any one city. I want it to be completely distributed. I want people in various countries in Africa. I want some folks in India. I want some folks in Europe. I want some folks in Australia. A few folks in the United States, because we're trying to build something global, and I need perspective that's local everywhere, and that's really powerful. And when you think about it, you just know it's going to happen, and you know that's the way we're going to start working. So that view has definitely changed over the past 5 years, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited that hopefully I'll be at 2 companies, we'll still be thriving, and it will not matter where I'm working from. I could work from your small hometown and have some cheese.
Best place in the world.
And still be as creative and still be as fast as we were if we were all in San Francisco.
So one more question. Let's choose. Oh, is there a woman? Let's far back with her hand up.
Hi, Jack. It's really nice to meet you. You're one of the reasons I'm an entrepreneur. And it's really refreshing hearing you talk about that you meditate in the morning, because I'm actually with the founding team of Flipped, which is a digital wellness app, and we're all about the tech-life balance. I just wanted to know, what are some of the practices that you encourage your employees to practice? I mean, you can't tell them to meditate all the time, right? But things to, take lunch and things like that.
Yeah. So one of the things we did last year at Twitter is we brought the whole company together to San Francisco, so 4,000 people. And we had 3 days of being together and just talking about our work. And on 2 of those days, we got all 4,000 people to meditate for 10 minutes. And a lot of people thought it was kind of weird and awkward, but some people found it to be interesting enough to pull the thread on it. So I don't encourage it. I just talk about why it's useful for me and what what's resonated with me and why. The other thing that I did very poorly in the past when I was younger was I thought the strength was not sleeping. And I would only valuable and only doing the right thing if I was sleeping as little as possible. And so I was doing all the Mountain Dew and the not sleeping and the not exercising and not being healthy at all. And now I try to get 8 to 9 hours every single night of sleep, and I focus a lot on exercise and just staying healthy, and I'm so much happier and I'm so much more productive than I was in the past. So just talking about, again, the mistakes I made in the past, what I would tell myself if I could go back and to my younger self and tell that person what's up, it would be first and foremost focus on health, and that comes in multiple dimensions: meditation, sleep, physical exercise, those practices have been fundamental to me now. And then the only other thing that has helped me a lot is kind of as much as I can building self-awareness, especially where I feel uncomfortable. Like, what makes me uncomfortable and why am I uncomfortable because of it. And then I just kind of go right into it. So anything that makes me uncomfortable, I want to run to and figure out why it's uncomfortable and try to change the dynamic there. So when I was a kid, I had a speech impediment, and I went to a therapist, and it shut me down. I became super shy, and I wouldn't talk with my parents or my brothers or certainly anyone at school. And the scariest thing I could do is talk in front of someone, not just groups like this, but one-to-one, because I had this impediment where I would just mispronounce all my words and sound like gibberish. And at one point I realized, it's probably the 6th, 7th grade, I just can't function like this. So I got to do the really hard thing, and I have to join the speech team, and I have to get up there and speak to people. And again, the first exercise was the scariest thing ever, because they give you these topics, and you have 5 minutes to write a speech on a topic that you know nothing about, and then you have to give a 5-minute speech about this topic. And I did it, and I was a complete failure, but eventually, as I kept doing it and doing it and doing it, I got better and better and better. And that's, I recognize that this is a gap. I need to fix it if I want to do anything that I'm proud of. And eventually I overcame it. But even today, you know, there's this constant thing in my head of like, I'm going to mispronounce these words or these names or whatnot, and it kind of pulls me back. But I know that for my job, for me to, you know, attract people to work with us or tell our story about why Square, Twitter are valuable in the world, I need to push through and be uncomfortable and just, you know, really do the work and do the job. So I think the other practice is just recognizing where you feel uncomfort and embracing it as much as possible and seeing what you learn from it.
Amazing. Thank you guys. So unfortunately we're out of time right now, but again, please feel free to keep tweeting using the hashtag Empowering Entrepreneurs. And journalists, please feel free to follow Ahmed, who will take you to where our media scrum is taking place. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jack.